used to believe that love meant patience. That if you nurtured something quietly, steadily, with both hands open and no expectations of repayment, then it would last. I used to believe that the foundation of a relationship was built not in the bright, loud moments, but in the soft ones: morning coffee, shared silence, drifting to sleep knowing someone is beside you. I used to believe many things. I met Nick when I was 20, during my first semester of university. We were both standing in line at the registration office. I remember he was wearing a worn-out jacket, the kind with frayed cuffs, and he kept rubbing his hands together nervously. He looked like someone who didn't want to take up too much space in the world. I was the opposite, talkative, confident, maybe too optimistic for my own good. We started with jokes about how terrible the campus parking situation was. He laughed in that soft way of his, eyes down, as though laughter was a private act he was letting me witness. I found myself drawn to that held-back gentleness. My family wasn't struggling, though we weren't wealthy either. My parents saved for years to send me to that university. They bought me a used car, reliable, nothing lavish. I worked part-time. I studied late. I tried hard. Nick came from much less. He never complained about it, but you could see it in the way he stretched every dollar, in how he fixed his own shoes with glue, how he knew every second-hand shop worth knowing. He didn't owe anyone anything, not even pity. We started as friends. Not the forced kind. The kind where you slip into each other's lives without noticing. We studied together, ate together, fell asleep in libraries and took photos of each other's open notebooks as proof of productivity. Years passed. We graduated. We found jobs, different departments, same company. That's when everything changed. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just, gently. Like the tide rising along your ankles until you realize you're already standing knee-deep. I think we fell in love long before we said it. But the company had a strict rule: no relationships between employees in the same division. It was written in bold, underlined, in every contract. They didn't want drama, didn't want messy breakups affecting workflow, didn't want emotional complications, but we were already complicated. So I quit. No one pressured me. Nick didn't ask. My boss didn't hint. I just felt, deep down, that I wanted to choose him. That love meant sacrifice, and that sacrifice was beautiful. I told myself it was romantic. And maybe it was, in its own naive way. With the sudden free time and the savings my parents had passed down, I started working on a business idea, a small design and branding agency. Something creative, something mine, something built from scratch. Nick stayed at the company. He liked structure, predictability, clear expectations. I admired that about him. The agency grew faster than I expected. Clients recommended clients. Projects expanded. I hired a small team. Then a bigger one. And just like that, the company was thriving. Nick wasn't thriving. He didn't talk about it at first. But I saw the quiet exhaustion. The bitterness that settled in his shoulders. The way he looked at me when I spoke about investors, expansion plans, new contracts. It wasn't resentment, not yet, but it was something. A shift in the air. But he still loved me. And I still loved him. We bought a house. A quiet one, just outside the city. Big windows, tall ceilings, a yard with enough space for the dog we always talked about. We adopted a Great Dane. His name was Atlas. Gentle giant, lazy, affectionate, a creature too large for most spaces, but perfect for ours. For a while, life felt warm, steady, real. We grew into each other, grew around each other, and then came the slow cracks. The tiny ones, the kind you don't notice until they join into something large enough to threaten the foundation. Nick burned out, completely. He would wake up already tired, already angry, already defeated. The job drained him. He said it felt like drowning, like breathing through heavy cloth, like being erased one day at a time. One night, he sat at the kitchen table with his hands covering his face and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." So I offered him freedom. I told him to quit. That I could handle the finances. That he could rest, reset, find something new, something that made him happy. He resisted. He said it felt wrong. Said a man should provide. I told him love didn't measure itself through paychecks. Eventually, reluctantly, he agreed. And at first, it was beautiful. He cooked. He cleaned. He repaired things around the house. He took Atlas on long walks through the woods. He laughed again. He slept deeply. He looked lighter. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, he stopped. The meals turned into takeout orders. The cleaning turned into a cleaning service I hadn't hired. The dog walker started showing up. Packages arrived for items we already owned. And Nick spent more time in bed. Or scrolling. Or silent. I didn't see it clearly until the night I had wine with a friend and she asked casually. "So what does Nick do now? Like, day to day?" And I opened my mouth, and realized I had no answer. But that was only the beginning. I started noticing little things first. The way Nick would come home and drop his bag by the door. Not in the small woven basket we always used for shoes and keys, but just anywhere. I would step over it, move it, straighten things, place the keys where they belonged. Small gestures of consideration that had once been automatic for him became absent. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't distant, not at first. He was just tired. He would collapse on the couch and close his eyes before I even finished asking, "How was your day?" And I understood. I truly did. I had burned out once myself, back when I was building my business from nothing. I remember the nights of crying quietly into a pillow so no one would hear. I remember the shaking hands, the nausea that came from reading emails I couldn't answer fast enough. I remembered not recognizing myself in the mirror. So when Nick began to drag himself through life, I didn't question it. I just wanted to help. I suggested therapy. He said therapy was for people who couldn't handle life. I suggested a vacation. He said vacations were pointless. Problems would still be waiting when he came home. I suggested he quit. He laughed at first, genuinely. He thought I was joking. But I looked him in the eye and said it again, slowly, softly. "Nick, you don't have to stay there. Let me help. Let me support us for a while." His face changed. Not angry, not offended, just scared. But what would I be, then? He asked. "My husband," I said. He didn't answer. But a week later, he quit. And for a while, life was light again. He woke up with the dog, took long walks in the park, tried different breakfast recipes, read books on the porch. He looked younger, 5, maybe 7 years younger, like the world had finally released its grip on him. I would come downstairs in the morning to a pan of scrambled eggs and roasted tomatoes. The house smelled like coffee and sunlight. We laughed again, we cuddled again, we were ourselves again. But peace rarely lasts when something inside someone stays unresolved. The first sign came in the form of convenience. "I think I'll get groceries delivered today. The store feels crowded." Then, "Do you mind if we get takeout?" I burned the chicken. Then, "I didn't get to walk the dog today. I was tired." Little excuses that piled up like dust. It didn't bother me at first. I was busy. I was always busy. My company was expanding faster than I could manage. New clients, new investors, new deadlines. I was doing interviews, traveling, signing papers at midnight. I didn't notice when the rhythm shifted. When the balance shifted. When I started carrying everything again. But I remember the exact moment I realized things had changed. I was sitting in a cafe with my friend, Melissa. A quiet afternoon, warm tea, sunlight through tall windows. We were talking about work. About life. About how strangely fast time moves when you're not paying attention. She asked, casually, with no deeper intention at all. "And how is Nick doing now that he's home full-time?" And I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. Not because I didn't have the words, but because I honestly didn't know. I realized I hadn't really talked to him in weeks. I knew what shows he had been watching, because I heard them playing when I worked upstairs. I knew what food he'd been ordering, because I saw the bags in the trash. I knew the dog was being walked by the neighbor's teenage son, because I saw the transfers in the bank statement. And I knew the house was being cleaned by someone we paid, because the floors sparkled in ways Nick never cared to maintain. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't trying. Something inside me clenched. Not anger, just grief. I drove home slowly that day. He didn't greet me when I walked in. He didn't look up from his phone when I sat beside him on the couch. He didn't notice the silence in my breathing. That night, I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his soft, even breaths. He looked peaceful, completely at ease, and I wondered when I had last felt the same. But that was only the beginning. I didn't confront him right away. I think a part of me hoped the shift was temporary, that he was just adjusting, recalibrating, trying to figure out who he was without work. Identity is not something people put down easily, it clings. It shapes, it anchors. I understood that, so I waited. I gave him space. I tried to be patient. But patience is a strange thing. It can look a lot like denial if you stare at it too long. I began to notice his habits changing, subtle things at first. He started staying up later. I would wake at 2 a.m. and see the warm glow of the hallway light, hear him quietly closing the bathroom door, or pacing the kitchen. He would say he couldn't sleep. Stress, maybe, thoughts that wouldn't settle. But the more I looked, the more I noticed patterns. The phone screen that turned away when I walked by. The quick clearing of browser tabs when I entered the room. The way he laughed suddenly, softly, at something I couldn't see. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I trusted him. I told myself love meant trust. But love also meant seeing what was right in front of you. One afternoon, I came downstairs early from a work call that had been cancelled. The house was quiet, too quiet. The dog was asleep by the window, his breathing slow and deep. The air felt still, like it was holding something. I walked through the rooms, calling Nick's name softly but not really expecting a response. He was sitting at the dining table, staring at his phone, completely absorbed. So absorbed that he didn't notice me. I didn't lean over him. I didn't speak. I just stood behind him long enough to see the reflection of the screen in the glass of the cabinet in front of him. Messages. Long messages. Scrolling messages. They weren't sexual. They weren't romantic. But they were intimate. He was talking to someone about his fears, his regrets, his boredom, his resentment. About me. I saw lines like, "She doesn't understand how lost I feel. I don't know who I am without a job. I feel like I'm nobody. She just keeps going like everything is fine. She doesn't need me. I think she only stayed because she didn't want to fail." The words didn't stab me. They didn't shatter me. They just hurt. Not like a wound. Like a bruise that had been forming for years and was only now revealing its color. I stepped back before he saw me and went upstairs as quietly as I came. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just sat on the edge of our bed and folded my hands together. All this time, I had been trying to support him. To save him, in a way. And he had been drowning without reaching for my hand. He wasn't cheating, not in the obvious sense. But he had built a world where I couldn't enter. A space where he could be weak without me, vulnerable without me, emotional without me. A place where I wasn't welcome. That night, I lay awake again, listening to him breathe, watching the rise and fall of his chest. He looked like the same man I had loved for more than a decade. The same smile, the same freckles near his shoulder, the same way he curled slightly toward me in his sleep. But I realized we weren't living the same life anymore. We were lying beside each other in the same bed, but miles apart. The next morning, I decided to talk to him. Not fight. Talk. I made coffee. I sat at the table. I waited for him to come downstairs. He shuffled in with sleepy eyes and messy hair, wearing the gray t-shirt he always stole from me. I motioned for him to sit. He did, slowly, sensing something. I chose my words carefully. "Nick, are you unhappy?" He blinked. Once. Twice. Then his face softened, not with guilt, but with something like relief. "I don't know," he admitted. "I feel empty, like I don't matter." I nodded. Calm. Steady. "You matter to me," I said. He looked away. "I know, but that's the problem. I feel like I only matter to you. Not to the world. Not to myself." His voice cracked a little, and for a moment, my heart ached for him. Truly ached. But there was something else there too. A quiet realization. He didn't want a partner. Not anymore. He wanted someone to blame for his emptiness. We talked for a long time that morning. Hours, maybe. The kind of conversation that doesn't have raised voices or tears. Just honesty laid bare like bones on a cold table. When we finished, there was no resolution. No promise. Just silence between us. He went upstairs. I sat alone at the table. The dog came and rested his head on my knee. I held him, grateful for something warm that didn't hurt. But that was only the beginning of the real fracture. Because when people feel small, they often try to find something, or someone, that makes them feel large again. And that's where everything truly began to break. I think the hardest part of losing someone is realizing that the loss didn't happen all at once. It happens in small pieces. Quiet pieces. Moments so subtle you miss them until they are already gone. After that conversation, the house felt different. Not colder, not tense, just muted, as if someone had turned the volume down on our lives. Nick moved through the rooms more slowly, like he was always thinking about something else. I tried to be present, tried to ask him things, involve him in things, bring him back into us. But it was like speaking into fog. The words left my mouth and disappeared before they reached him. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't resentful. He was absent. He spent more time outside, walking the dog in long, aimless loops around the neighborhood, sometimes for hours. When I would ask where he went, he just shrugged. Just walking. I didn't push. I didn't want to be the person who cornered him. I wanted to be the person he came back to on his own. But some people don't return to what reminds them of who they used to be. They look for somewhere new to become someone else. It was early winter when I noticed him change again. He seemed lighter, not happier, but occupied. Engaged. Focused on something I couldn't see. He would check the clock more. Reapply cologne in the middle of the day. Run his hands through his hair before leaving the house as if meeting someone. When I asked, he always had explanations. Simple, harmless explanations. Just getting some air, going to the park, might stop at the cafe. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious on the surface. But you don't spend 10 years sharing a life with someone without learning the language of their smallest gestures. He was hiding something, not a name, not a lie, just the existence of something private. And that privacy, more than anything, is what began to hollow me out. Work was demanding during this time. My company had grown so fast that I sometimes felt like I was sprinting beside it, trying not to fall behind. I was doing meetings at all hours, reviewing proposals with legal teams, traveling twice a month, planning a new product launch. I felt stretched thin but proud of what I had built, proud of what I had earned. But something small and sharp lived under that pride now. A quiet fear, a constant question. Is he slipping away because I built too much? Or because he built nothing? And the worst part, I didn't know if I was allowed to ask. Then came the Thursday, the day everything cracked. My mother's birthday. She was turning 60. She never liked Nick, not because she disliked him as a person, but because she believed he wanted to be taken care of more than he wanted to try. She wasn't entirely wrong, but love makes you forgive flaws before they become problems. Nick told me to go without him. He said he'd just get in the way. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy to negotiate peace between them again. I packed my bag. I took the dog to the sitter. I kissed Nick on the cheek before leaving. His cheek was cool. He didn't lean into me like he used to. The drive was supposed to take 4 hours. Instead, it took 1 hour to realize the weather was changing. Snow, heavy, thick, blinding. The kind of snow that muffles the world like cotton. 40 minutes later, my car gave out. Engine failure. Just my luck. I managed to glide to the side of the road and call a tow truck. The driver said he could take the car to the nearest service station. But it would take hours. No rental cars, no buses, no safe roads open, so I called a taxi. A taxi that took me all the way back home. The whole drive, I stared out the window and felt something pressing on my chest. Not suspicion, not anger, just a quiet dread, like I was returning to a truth I had been avoiding. When the cab pulled up to the house, the windows were glowing with warm light. The curtains were partially drawn. Everything looked peaceful. I remember thinking, I shouldn't feel afraid to walk into my own home. I opened the door softly. The house was quiet, too quiet. I walked down the hallway and toward the bedroom. The door was almost closed, just a thin line of warm light slicing across the floor. I didn't make a sound. I didn't inhale. I didn't blink. I pushed the door open. And there he was, Nick, in our bed, with a woman who had gray streaks in her hair, loose skin on her arms, and a softness around the jaw that only comes with age. She was over 50, maybe older. Nick saw me first. His eyes widened, not with guilt, not with fear, but with shock that I had returned. He said my name. I didn't answer. I looked at him, then at her, then at the room that used to feel like home. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why. I simply turned around and walked out. Because in that moment, the truth was not that he loved her. The truth was that he needed someone who made him feel large again. Someone who needed him. Someone who looked at him with gratitude instead of expectation. Someone who made him feel like he mattered. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being that person for him. Or maybe I never was. I walked out of the bedroom without closing the door. Not out of cruelty. Not out of drama. Just because I didn't have the strength to move my hand. The house felt impossibly silent, even though I could still hear them behind me. Muffled voices. Quick movements. Soft apologies that never reached my ears. I didn't remember putting on my coat. I didn't remember grabbing my keys. I don't even remember breathing. I just remember the cold. The kind that doesn't touch your skin, only your bones. I sat in my car in the driveway, engine off, watching the snow fall. Watching it blur the windshield, the yard, the lights from the house that now felt like a stranger's home. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just sat there, like someone had unplugged me from myself. It took me 40 minutes to be able to turn the key and drive. But I didn't go far. I drove to a hotel near the highway, paid for a room with my card, and sat on the edge of the bed without taking my coat off. I stared at the wall until morning. I thought the shock would wear off and grief would come. But it didn't. Not yet. Instead, I felt an extraordinary stillness. Like the moment right before a wave collapses on itself. When Nick called the next morning, I didn't answer. When he texted, I didn't read it. When he emailed, I closed the notification. I needed time to understand the shape of what had happened. Because it wasn't just my husband cheated. It was. The man I loved forgot how to feel like himself beside me. It was. He chose someone who made him feel needed, because I had grown too strong to need him. It was. I spent years building a life for both of us, and somewhere along the way he started to feel like a passenger instead of a partner. And I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. I returned home the next evening. Not to talk. Not to reconcile. Just to reclaim myself. Nick was waiting in the kitchen. His face looked older, like one night had aged him a decade. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "Please don't," I said quietly. "Not yet." He closed his mouth. We sat at opposite ends of the kitchen table. The same table where we had eaten dinners, laughed, argued, planned our life. "Who is she?" I asked finally. He swallowed. Hard. "Her name is Claire. She works at the community center. She leads one of the volunteer groups. I started helping there, just to get out of the house." "It wasn't," he stopped. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I nodded. "Do you love her?" I asked. He stared down at his hands. "I don't know. She listens to me. She sees me. She makes me feel like I'm good at something. Like I matter." The words didn't wound. They clarified. Because Nick didn't say, "I love her more." He said, "I love who I am when I'm with her." And I understood. Painfully. Quietly. Completely. "You could have told me," I said. "We could have tried to fix this." "I didn't want to be fixed," he whispered. "I wanted to feel enough." Silence filled the room again. This time, it didn't hurt. This time, it felt like truth settling where it belonged. We divorced within 3 months. He did try to take half of everything, my company, my investments, the house I bought, even the dog. His lawyer argued that because we were married when I built the business, he was entitled to its growth. What he didn't know was that long before any of this, I had listened to my mother's advice. Love deeply. Trust fully. Protect yourself. The company was structured under my name, formed before our marriage, legally and financially insulated. Every contract, every patent, every filing, airtight. He walked away with the car, his savings, and enough money to start over but not enough to drown me. He looked broken when the judge ruled. And I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. So tired. The house felt too large without him. The dog slept at the foot of the bed every night, guarding the space where Nick used to be. I kept walking into rooms expecting to see him, laughing, complaining, asking what I wanted for dinner. Grief is strange like that. It doesn't mourn the person who betrayed you. It mourns the life you thought you were living. Months passed. Winter became spring. The dog got older. My company expanded. I learned to enjoy silence again. One morning, I took my coffee to the backyard and sat under the oak tree. The air was warm, and the world felt unhurried. I closed my eyes and realized I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not for closure, not for apology, not for understanding, just peace. And I had it. Not because I won, not because I rebuilt myself, but because I never lost myself in the first place. I only needed to remember who I was.